Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. Make sure you go check out all my books. Start with the best-selling Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and the 2 workbooks that are fillable that go right along with it, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. Also, for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Now, that's a book of pictures you give to your children, and you let them go through it, and in the pictures are lessons about security and awareness, and you, the parent, go over to teamlittlebigs.com and download the free lesson plans that go with each picture. All of this is a package that makes your life, your family more aware, safer, and able to look at yourself from the attacker's point of view. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 accompanying workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that exist on teamlittlebigs.com. Go check them out wherever books are sold. And let's start the show.
But what will you tell us about what's happening right now?
Still looking at the coincident and lagging indicator. Let's see. For a while, it was how can stocks be where they are because of oil prices? Remember, that was your take then.
Right.
How can it be based on where interest rates are right now? Then it could be how can stocks be, and then it was every single discussion you have over the weekend is about how can stock prices be here when the economy is here.
Right.
Now it's going to be your earnings, but can you see how that probably isn't the coincidence, the stuff
Joe.
right in your face? We're going to have David Lebovitz on. He's going to say every client he talks to is asking him, how can the stock market be here when everything else is...
And that's the question. And there are a lot of smart people who have that view. You may not have that view.
Why is that the smart people? They've been wrong for 35%. Why are they smart? Just because they can see what's right in front of their nose? That doesn't make them smart. It makes them.
Joe, you missed it on the way down too.
Makes them not savvy about the market.
Joe, you missed it. You missed Joe. You missed it 100% on the way down, and you missed the 100,000 deaths. So we can have this debate back and forth, and you can try to question the questions I'm asking. But there are smart people, including your friend Stan Druckenmiller, who's argued that the market has been over. Hold on. I'm not going to do this with you, Joe. Every morning you try to question the questions I'm asking. These are questions that investors are asking every single morning. I am just trying to get through some of this clutter. I may be right, I may be wrong. Investors may be right, they may be wrong. That's what makes a market. But it doesn't make people a good person or a bad person. It doesn't make it right to act the way you are. I'm sorry.
Okay. You yelled at the poor guy about the guy yesterday with masks. It's like, why are you yelling at me now?
I'm not, Joe.
You just yelled again. I don't know. I'm just trying to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
No, you're not. No, you're not, Joe. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead with the news.
You panicked about the market, panicked about COVID, panicked about the ventilators, panicked about the PPE, panicked about ever going out again, panicked that we'd ever get back to normal.
Joseph, you didn't panic about anything.
That? What good is it? Why not help people keep their head? I understand
100,000 people died, Joe, and all you did was try to help your friend, the president. That's what you did. Every single morning on this show. Every single morning on this show, you abused and abused your position, Joe.
That's totally unfair.
You abused and abused your position.
I'm trying to help investors keep their cool, keep their heads, and as it turned out, that's what they should have done. That's what they should have done. They should have kept their heads. If they had listened to you, Andrew, we're supposed to be at about 8,000.
I wasn't arguing to go sell your stocks, Joseph. I was arguing about people's lives.
We understand.
People's lives.
Andrew,
that's
it's a global
argument.
pandemic.
Do the news. I'm begging you to do the news, Joseph.
It's a global pandemic.
I'm begging you,
Andy.
Please.
It's a global pandemic, Andy, where per capita deaths, we're down near the low end of per capita deaths. We're nowhere near per 100,000. Most places are at 60 deaths per 100,000. We're at 29. So it's terrible that we've lost 100,000 lives. It's terrible. But it was never going to be that we weren't going to come back and that we weren't going to return to normal. And, siding with Ackman and everything else, that, giving credence to all that panic didn't help any investors at all, or people with their anxiety and everything else. So that's why we're here, to try and navigate people through, not trying to help Donald Trump. Anyway, let's look at Tesla.
Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. And that was one heck of a soundbite, wasn't it? So we're going to talk about that soundbite because I think that is, wow, that is probably, with all the stuff that I want to talk about today, about, depending on when you listen to the show, about the liberals and the mindset and still what's happening in this nation and even the stuff that's going on in Minneapolis. And another perfect example is what happened in Central Park with this lady who freaked out because a guy asked her to put her dog on the leash. This is all great examples of the reality of the leftist mindset. And I talked a little bit about this yesterday with the social media issues and what's going on in social media and how they're wanting to police our thoughts and what we say, and they're wanting to quote unquote fact check things and integrity, make sure that what we're saying has integrity. And even they are arguing about it. Mark Zuckerberg said something about Jack from Twitter, and Jack from Twitter responded to him. And of course I had to jump in the middle of that and go on Twitter and tweet at Jack. Zuckerberg, I mean, look, the reality is unless the people, it's the same thing with everything, right? Unless the people rise up, nothing's going to change. Now, I will tell you one thing that the left definitely has, and I'm going to talk about that more in detail here in a little bit, but I mean, regardless of what they're doing right or wrong when it comes to protests, they seem to really cling together well. The right just does not do that. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk first about the reality of that soundbite and the things that it says far beyond anything that has to do with politics. Okay, let's just start by, I can't tell you how amazed I am by the soundbite. Let's start with the two people that were involved in the argument. Andrew Ross Sorkin, that's the guy who just kept saying, just do the news. And he said, 100,000 people died. 100,000 people died. Well, so he's arguing with Joe Kernan from CNBC. And I mean, besides Larry Kudlow, Joe Kernan is probably the most recognizable face that you will see on CNBC. He's been there forever. And so the first thing after I listened to that soundbite, after seeing it on Drudge, Drudge is a leftist newspaper or online publication. I'm sure that the reason they put that on Drudge was because they're champions of, not of Joe Kernan, they're champions of Andrew Ross Sorkin. And I find it's interesting that he uses all three names, but because he's a liberal and he's a leftist and he's from New York. And so as soon as I started hearing what they were saying on this, I immediately looked up their Wikipedia pages. Quickest way to find out some facts. Not all facts, not on Wikipedia. And please do not go off of Google. If you Google something like Navy SEALs and they have all these questions that can be answered, it's all a bunch of crap. It's either for sales or some idiot that doesn't know what to talk about answers those questions. So do some digging. But just off the top, I looked them up on Wikipedia. And it is unbelievable how the narrative that Andrew Ross Sorkin follows is perfectly attuned to the left. And when I look at his background, perfectly attuned to the left. This guy, and I'm going to play the soundbite again here in a minute, but Andrew Ross Sorkin, born February 19th, 1977. He's an American journalist and author. Okay, right off the bat, if that's all you see and they're a liberal, then you know that their opinion, and this is something very important that I want liberals to understand, especially if they're liberals with experience in something, right? This guy is 43 years old. I'm 50. He's 43 years old. I'm not that much older than him, but and I know it, listen, I know it sounds to people like when I'm on this show that I'm bragging about my background. It's just, I use myself as a litmus test. By no means am I the smartest person in the world or the most experienced person in the world, but I mean, I've done a lot in the 50 years that I've been on this earth. And so I can use that as a litmus test, not because I've been super successful in any of those things, but because I did them and I gained the experience and the knowledge. And there's people that listen to this show that are far more experienced and knowledgeable than I am. But the point being, when you take somebody who's done a lot of things, people that have made something out of nothing, and then you compare them to the liberal mouthpieces on television, what you're going to see is that they don't have any experience in anything. It doesn't take, I don't care, and I would sit here and debate the most experienced journalist that there is. It doesn't take a lot of knowledge to be a journalist. You need to be a good writer, or you need to have a knack, especially when you're on TV. You need to have and it's a raw talent to be able to speak and to narrate the news. There's no doubt about that. That's talent. Sometimes people practice it and they get better at it, but it does not give you the knowledge base, the experience base, and the understanding of a craft to go and analyze it on a daily basis, which these people do. And many of them analyze everything that's in the news as though they know everything, something about everything, or a lot about everything. And they don't. This guy is a perfect example. Andrew Ross Sorkin, American journalist and author. He's a financial columnist. Now, when I looked him up, and maybe I'm wrong about this, maybe that's not in here, but when I looked through his early life and education, which they have on Wikipedia, again, not always the most vast amount of truth, but I do not see anywhere that it says he was ever in finance. It doesn't say that he was in finance. It says that he immediately after high school, he interned, or in high school as a student, he interned his senior year with the New York Times. That's his senior year in high school. He worked with the New York Times. Now, his parents, his mom is a playwright and his dad is an attorney in New York. You don't get any more liberal than that. You don't get any more liberal than that. And it keeps getting better from there. I looked through here. I didn't see anything about him being a stockbroker or an investor or any of that stuff. He just became somehow a financial reporter. And now when he's on not MSNBC, but CNBC, he's probably on MSNBC too as well. But when he's on there, he's on in the mornings debating about economics and bringing, as you saw right there, politics into the stock market, which is, listen, those people are leftists. A lot of the people, believe it or not, in the stock market are leftists. I don't know how they jive that, but when I looked through, the more I dove into this guy, I just didn't see anything that had to do with him being a financial expert. He's just a writer. He even got into a back and forth with Glenn Greenwald, who I absolutely cannot stand. I think he's another one of these people, an arrogant, just kind of a prick, who is a writer with no real experience in anything, and a big Edward Snowden supporter because he helped leak and publish all the information from Edward Snowden. And I guess this guy got in a little debate back and forth with Glenn Greenwald one day, and said a bunch of stuff that he thought he should be arrested along with Edward Snowden. And then because he caught heat for that, he apologized to Greenwald, and Greenwald accepted. That's one of the big things in his Wikipedia page. So in 2011, Sorkin became a co-anchor of CNBC Squawk Box. I just have to laugh at this stuff, folks, because there's nowhere in there where it says he had any financial experience. But yet he's co-anchor on CNBC Squawk Box, in addition to his duties at the New York Times. He has appeared on NBC's Today Show, Charlie Rose, who we know is an all-ethical guy, all things NBC, PBS as well, MSNBC, I was right, he was on Hardball, Morning Joe. But the fact is, regardless of where he has been to talk finance, he doesn't have any experience operating as a stockbroker, working in a hedge fund, even sweeping floors in the NASDAQ. I mean, he's nothing. And again, it keeps getting better and better as I read through there. Now I'm looking at how he is the co-creator of a Showtime series called Billions. And it is loosely based on the crusading federal prosecutor of financial crimes, Preet Bharara, who we all know is a leftist, who was a U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, who Trump fired. So it just gets better and better. And so now that I've given you that type of a background, right, and you see the reality, he's all twisted into, different financial people and Wall Street and Hollywood and all these different, and NBC and all these leftists. You start to get a better picture of who he is every day when he comes on this show or when he's on all these other shows, spouting not just that he went out and researched this and he's reporting on it, but that he's giving people financial advice and pushing people to see things a certain way in the financial sector, which, if you don't realize, the backbone of this nation is, well, it's the people, but it's our taxes and it's our money that we spend. And it's what keeps capitalism going. And the markets, love them or hate them, are a huge part of how the money flows in this country. And if the leftists want to affect, they'll always accuse the right of being fear mongers, but they do it the worst. And this guy right here, and when you start to look at all these different people, they're so pissy. They say stuff out of emotion, but their emotion is based in some weird false reality. And it all has a foundation of people like this, people that don't have any experience in the crap that they're spewing or analyzing or leading, which is the case like when you look at Minneapolis, for instance, where all this nonsense is happening with the riots and the police and things. This guy is a perfect example of this trickle-down effect of the grasp that the left has on this country. And the new way of thinking, I don't think that that's correct, so it must be fact, which is the same thing I talked about yesterday in episode 35 when it comes to all the social media platforms. We're being told what we should say and how we should say it and what has integrity by people who don't have morals, people who don't have experience, life experience or not. Most of them are under the age of 35. They have never done anything to earn the freedom that they have. Many of them are atheists, very far liberal socialists, and they're going to tell us what to do. And let me just tell you something. The two things that prove that facts are not always truth is science itself and socialists. And people like this is why. This 43-year-old kid doesn't know anything about what he's talking about. He's never lived outside of New York to any extent, never suffered. He grew up, his parents were obviously in New York. They were obviously established. And yet he's going to, and there's people on the right that is just exactly like this. Everybody's superhero, Candace Owens, who is just a clickbaiter. That's all she does. Just a clickbaiter. Has no real experience in anything to be telling you. Listen, people can tell you all about freedom and what's best for freedom, and they're patriots. It's not what they say. It's the actions that they produce by the things that they've done in their life. Those are the people that you should be listening to. Those are the people that you should be lifting up, not the people who come out and say what you want to hear. That is what Hollywood does. Hollywood goes out and creates a story and says the things that they know in a way, in a storyline that they know are going to get you riled up in some way. That's why so many movies are exactly the same. And that's why when people went to the movies, when you see the trailers are always so good because they put something out there to spin you up so you go see the rest of it. And very similar to Hollywood. Most of the people on the right and on the left both that are the clickbaiters, the people who have the loudest mouths, the people that the news media networks put up front are quite often and most of the time the least experienced. They have the least knowledge and almost zero experience in anything that they're talking about. And so when you hear the soundbite, you may think, oh, it's a patriot, that person's. But when you look at the reality of what a 2-minute interview or a 20-second soundbite is, it's no different than a trailer from a movie. And it gets you pumped up. And then those people go out and with the help of others, they write books or they do speaking engagements, and people think they know what they're talking about, and they don't. It's a way to make money. It's a way to affect the populace and how they think. Listen, when I was in the FBI, I remember being in Times Square and watching on numerous occasions. There's a little thing that they have set, bleachers that they have set up there, and you can go stand up there. And I used to go up there if we were following somebody, or I live right down by there, so if I was showing somebody around, it was fun to take people down to Times Square when it was really packed, and go to the very top of that and just sit and watch, and you could literally see criminals working, drug dealers doing drug deals, people scanning the crowd, and these pickpockets will shift the crowd. They will work together to push the crowd in a certain way so that other people in there can pick the pockets. It's the exact same thing, except they're picking your mind and they're putting things in your brain. So when we look at this guy in this soundbite, this Andrew Ross Sorkin, he doesn't know anything about what he's talking about. And it's 100% emotional. You can tell in that interview that just like the lady in Central Park that was freaking out because a black guy asked her to put her dog on the leash, and she freaking flipped out, calls the police. If you haven't seen the video, it's actually very hard to watch because she's choking the crap out of her dog the whole time she's on. They actually came, and the rescue place that gave her that dog took the dog back. Her life is destroyed. That lady is forever going to be known as a freaking fruitcake Karen. I don't know what her real name is, but so now in contrast to this guy, Andrew Ross Sorkin, in contrast to him, you look at Joe Kernan. Joe Kernan, the first thing I see about this guy is he has a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Colorado, a master's in science and biology, and he's a stockbroker and TV news anchor. Now, very interesting when you compare that to Sorkin, because when I looked through, I didn't just stop at Wikipedia. I actually went and looked at many different things, and I could never find, strangely enough, what his degree's in. But he did graduate from Cornell, I guess it said on the New York Times biography. It says he graduated from Cornell. And it does say his alma mater is at Cornell University, but I never trust that on Wikipedia or the other places because many of the people that you see in TV media especially never graduated from college. They may have went to college, but they didn't graduate from there. So not to say that college is the end all be all for, how smart you are, but I don't know. It's very interesting when I look at people. I've pointed this out on this show before, that when people write their bios and they leave certain operational things out of their bios, it's very suspicious to me. I look at the things people say. I look at what they've actually done, not what they report or analyze, but what they've actually done. And I try to put together a picture of who these people are. And this he adds up to a leftist that grew up in New York, who had connections, started writing for the New York Times when he was still in high school, and then played that all the way into Hollywood as a screenwriter and as a business journalist. I don't know. In contrast to that, when I look at Joe Kernan, I look at somebody who simply has experience as a stockbroker. And so when you listen to the argument, what you're going to see is somebody who, and also his bio and stuff is very simple. He's very centered on economics and on the stock market. I mean, it's not like he varies outside of what he's talking about. Every once in a while he does. And trust me, the liberals pointed out that he denied climate change. It's a couple of other small little things, but they jump on that stuff. But pretty much over the years, Joe Kernan, who's 64, not 43, has real experience in what he talks about. And when you hear this debate between these two people, it comes out in flying colors. Now that I've told you this, you're going to see the stark contrast between a liberal who thinks they know everything about everything and a conservative, because Joe Kernan's clearly conservative. I mean, you can see in the things that he says to me when I analyze what he has said and the field that of work that he's in, and you can see that he's conservative. I'm assuming that he's conservative. He's definitely more conservative than Sorkin. But you can see, let's put conservative and liberal to the side. You can clearly see the difference between Joe Kernan, somebody with experience in a field who is well educated, versus a guy who grew up in New York in a liberal area, grew up liberal, has liberal parents, a father that's an attorney, which, I have friends that are attorneys. Some of them raise good kids, but a lot of them raise bigger jerks than they are because they grew up believing that they know everything. And these people, a lot of the people in New York that are in these positions think that it's their duty to tell everybody else everything that they're doing wrong. And they always accuse the conservatives throughout the years of doing that. But when you see this, you see Joe Kernan, who is the expert in this field. He has expertise. He has experience. He has knowledge. He has understanding and experience. And when you look at Andrew Ross Sorkin, you see somebody who's been writing for the New York Times since high school. He went to college, but that's it. Now listen to that soundbite again.
What will you tell us about what's happening right now?
Still looking at the coincident and lagging indicator. Let's see. For a while, it was how can stocks be where they are because of oil prices? Remember, that was your take then.
Right.
How can it be based on where interest rates are right now? Then it could be how can stocks be, and then it was every single discussion you have over the weekend is about how can stock prices be here when the economy is here. Right. Now it's going to be your earnings, but can you see how that probably isn't the coincidence, the stuff right in your face? We're going to have David Lebovitz on. He's going to say every client he talks to is asking him, how can the stock market be here when everything else is doing?
And that's the question. And there are a lot of smart people who have that view. You may not have.
Here's the other thing. First off, there's a lot of smart people. Liberals love to talk about other liberals and make them smart. They love to talk about how smart this person is. And it doesn't mean that they're smart. It means that they've said what this guy wants to hear. That's all. And if you get a chance to watch this soundbite, Joe Kernan's face, I mean, he really held himself together quite well. Of course, they have to, but Sorkin is not. Sorkin's like, you could tell he is emotional, like so many liberals. And again, you know, I know liberals, when you listen to this show, and I know many liberals, I'm not trying to come down on you and say that you're stupid. I'm saying that you don't want to be a part of this nonsense. You know, there's plenty of examples of how the reality is. It's not liberal or conservative. It's just what's effective. Don't break it. If it's not broken, don't try to fix it. And that's the way our Constitution is. And many things in this country where people just don't want to move forward, or they don't want to move forward. They don't want to progress away from something that is comfortable and works when it doesn't need to be that way. I mean, if you want a perfect example of that, as I always say, the smarter your phone gets, the dumber you get. Progression is not always a movement forward. Those are two different words. And you should realize that. You can progress downhill if you're moving in a direction. Remember that. Let's go on.
Are they? Why is that the smart people? They've been wrong for 35%. Why are they smart? Just because they can see what's right in front of their nose? That doesn't make them smart. It makes them. It makes
Joe,
them
you
not
missed it on the way down too.
Makes them
Joe,
not savvy about the market.
Joe, you missed it. You missed Joe. You missed.
Okay, and this is a typical tactic of people that don't know what they're talking about in media, and liberals, just like the lady in the park who was screaming at the guy who's probably another liberal, who, you know, I've always found that if I'm walking through the park, I lived in Manhattan for 15 years. If I'm walking through a park and somebody doesn't have their dog on a leash, unless that dog is on me trying to bite me, I don't feel the need to go tell the people to put their dog away or to put it on a leash. And it's clear that that was the tension between these two people. Now, she may have been an idiot. The dog may have been all over the place, but I just walk off. It's near Central Park. It's huge. Anyway, liberals love to scream, and they love to raise their voices and yell. And that makes them feel dominant, and it makes them feel like they're smarter than you. If they can command the conversation, that's what they do. Listen to this.
100% on the way down, and you missed the 100,000 deaths. So we can have this debate.
Okay. This has nothing to do with anything they're talking about. They're talking about how high the Dow was and the stock market, how it's crushed it, with the Dow rising 500 points. I think it's what it said. I mean, it's just going, it's unbelievable how high it's going for what's going on. And this guy, for some reason, can't stand that and has to use it as sound bites to sound alarms, because he and his friends, his liberal comrades, have probably sat around and gotten themselves all up in arms because they don't want the economy to do good under Donald Trump. They just don't. And so he gets loud and he brings up 100,000 deaths, as though the stock market should just shut down and finances should come to a halt because there's a virus out there. If we have a way to keep the economy going, isn't that a good thing?
Back and forth, and you can try to question the questions I'm asking, but there are smart people, including your friend Stan Druckenmiller, who has argued that the market has been over. Hold on.
There he goes.
Hold on. I'm not going to do this with you, Joe. Every morning you try to question the questions I'm asking. These are questions that investors are asking every single morning.
Imagine a stockbroker questioning the questions that a guy who has never worked in finance is asking. Gee, that's not surprising, is it? And yet he yells, and I got to hear that again when he yells out loud. Let's see here. Here it is again.
Asking every single morning. I am just questions that investors are asking every single asking. These are every morning. Hold on.
Yeah, here it is.
Hold on. I'm not going to do this with you.
He had to get the extra hold on in there. Idiot.
Joe, every morning you try to question the questions I'm asking. These are questions that investors are asking every single morning. I am just trying to get through some of this.
This guy looks like Anthony Weiner's brother, by the way.
Clutter. I may be right. I may be wrong. Investors may be right.
Most likely you're wrong.
May be wrong. That's what makes a market. But it doesn't make people a good person or a bad person. It doesn't make it right to act the way you are. I'm sorry.
And here's the other thing. Again, this is like a gold mine for the description of how liberals act, and really conservatives. I mean, Joe Kernan, again, I don't know if he's conservative fully or not, but I have a suspicion. But he sits there and he's trying not to be emotional about it. He's talking about stocks. This other guy is just ramping things up so that it's clickbait. It's just clickbait. So he can make himself feel good. But in this case, he is getting emotional about it because he is also a leftist. And he feels like he's on equal ground with Joe Kernan on this.
Okay, you yelled at the poor guy about the guy yesterday with masks. Is like, why are you yelling at me now?
Joe.
You just yelled again. I don't know. I'm just trying to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not. No, you're not, Joe. I'm sorry.
And so Joe says, I'm sorry. And he says, no, you're not. And then he turns around and says, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead with the news.
You panicked about the market, panicked about COVID, panicked about the ventilators, panicked about the PPE, panicked about ever going out again, panicked if we ever get back to...
Perfect saying, perfect. Joe Kernan is laying it out perfectly here. That these people panic about everything. Now, people gave me flack because I'm still wearing, there's a lot of these people that have made wearing a mask, they're mountain that they're going to die on. I think it's stupid. If you don't realize that there's a virus out there, you're an idiot. There is a virus out there. It probably is going to spike again. I already had it, but there's nothing that I can prove that says I'm not going to get it again. And trust me, folks, it was not fun. It was a whole month out of my life. People died around me that had it. And it's not a joke. But I'm not an alarmist, and I believe in freedom. And I actually don't, I think that potentially, we don't really know, but potentially the lockdown helped for a period of time. But people are stupid. They're going to go out and they're going to rebel. They're going to rebel against being locked down. And they're going to spread this thing again. The virus didn't go away. It's not like what started occurring in February and March has now in May and almost June has just suddenly gone away. It hasn't gone away. And, news to everybody out there that's anti-vaxxers, they're not going to come up with a vaccine for a virus. There is no such thing as a vaccine for a virus. It's an inoculation to get your antibodies up so that your body can fight against this virus. That's what it is. If you didn't know the difference between that, I would advise it before you take a stand that you do some research on this stuff. So when we're looking at this and the things that Joe Kernan just pointed out about the alarmist attitude of the left, the difference between what I'm saying about and warning you and saying, be smart, don't rebel because somebody wants you to wear a mask. Just put a mask on. Don't shoot. That's not your mountain to die on. Wait until all this stuff is over with and they say, okay, we do have an inoculation, or we do have whatever they want to call it, vaccine inoculation, or the herd immunity has spread enough where you're safe. If they're still forcing you to do stuff, then as far as the mask goes, that's when I would start conquering that mountain. We're still early on in this, but listen, I get it. People want to be out. They want to be free. I get it. But there's going to be a result to that. It's not like you're going to be able to, when there's a virus out there, and those of you that are saying there's not, there is a virus out there. And if you want to play fast and loose with it and you think it's nothing, I think maybe the quarantine thing has been lived its time, and I think we should just let people go about and do whatever they want to do. And if 50 million people die because it was their choice, so be it. And if they want to live with the responsibility of killing people because they caught it and then spread it, which happens, typically it's around 80 people for some reason. It seems like all these, like where there's a church, somebody had it and they went in there, they spread it to like 83 people. They go to a pool party, 80 people get it. I don't know. But I don't think we can stop this. I really don't. I think it should just be up to the people. And then listen, if it spreads, it spreads, and then we'll have to deal with it. Why am I saying that? Because I don't think there's any way around it. I really don't. What you're seeing in Minneapolis, because the guy was killed by the cop, keeping people locked up could cause the same type of effect. There could be riots, people get killed, cops could get hurt. I don't think we have a responsible enough nation and world, for that matter, to do what it takes to fight a virus. They're going to turn into people like this idiot on here, this Sorkin guy. They're going to turn this into something that it's not. Whether it's overreacting and freaking out, or it's going the other way and saying that, you're an idiot if you wear a mask. And then in the middle of that, you have the politicians, the leftist people who are fully taking advantage of this. There's no doubt about that. Fully taking advantage of it, and taking advantage of these leftists who, this guy, probably more than thinking that all these things are bad, he's using these things that Joe Kernan's pointing out to get clicks and to get his word out there. That's what they do in journalism.
Normal.
Joseph, you didn't panic about anything.
That? What good is it? Why
Joseph,
not help people
died.
keep their head?
Here he goes again.
I understand that.
100,000 people died, Joe, and all you did was try to help your friend, the president.
You see this again. I know I'm mixing this up a little bit about liberals and everybody else, but this interview is the perfect example of every step that they take. It's like he went and took, right before this interview, he wrote a bullet points on a cue card of all the things he had to do before the interview was over with, that the left does. And this bringing up again and again, 100,000 people died, has nothing to do with what Joe Kernan is talking about in this interview. Nothing. And then he brings up Trump, because that's the, I've talked about that before, the Happy Gilmore movie, where he was had to give a book report on stage, and he was talking about, I think it's the little dog that could, or whatever, the little puppy that could, or something like that. And he gets to the end of his book report, the principal says, that in no way made any sense whatsoever. We're all now dumber for having heard it. May God have mercy on our souls. That's what this is when he keeps yelling out Trump, because at the end of that speech that Happy Gilmore gave, he then yells out Nib High Football Rules, because it's the name of the school, and everybody goes crazy clapping and cheering, because it's a catchphrase that he knows that people will wave a flag to. That's what this guy does. He says nonsense as soon as Joe Kernan came back with something that really crushed his argument, and the reason for escalating the argument, he comes back with 100,000 people died, Joe, while you sat back and supported President Trump. I mean, it had nothing to do with anything.
That's what you did every single morning on this show. Every single morning on this show, you abused and abused your position, Joe.
That's totally unfair.
You abused and abused your position.
I'm trying to help investors keep their cool, keep their heads, and as it turned out, that's what they should have done. That's what they should have done. They should have kept their heads.
See, and what Joe Kernan is saying, every day he would come on there, and like a good stockbroker, he would temper that panic, because he didn't want people to make rash decisions and sell their stocks. He wanted them to keep their stuff in there and wait to see what happens with this, that there might be brighter days ahead where their stocks may bounce. Makes sense. I'm sure he was saying sell some things and keep other things, but that's not what this other guy is all up in arms about, this Sorkin guy. Let's go on.
If they had listened to you, Andrew, we're supposed to be at about 8,000.
I wasn't arguing to go sell your stocks, Joseph. I was arguing about people's lives.
This is like listening to a high school graduate, which I had, wasn't even a graduate, somebody in high school, debating me because I said fireman, and they wanted it to be fire person. And this makes about as much sense as that argument.
Understand
people's lives.
Andrew,
That's
it's a
the
global
argument.
pandemic.
Do the news. I'm begging you to do the news, Joseph.
It's a global pandemic.
I'm begging you,
Andy.
please.
It's a global pandemic, Andy, where per capita deaths, we're down near the low end of per capita deaths. We're nowhere near per 100,000. Most places are at 60 deaths per 100,000. We're at 29. So it's terrible that we've lost 100,000 lives. It's terrible. But it was never going to be that we weren't going to come back and that we weren't going to return to normal. And, siding with Ackman and everything else, that, giving credence to all that panic didn't help any investors at all, or people with their anxiety and everything else. So that's why we're here, to try and navigate people through, not trying to help Donald Trump.
Wow. If you get the chance to go watch this on your phone or computer, please do, because you're going to me talking about it is one thing, but seeing it is the other. You got to see it. Now, I want to transition real quick. Not really transition, but along those same lines. Okay. There's a story that I saw from Vox Recode. That's another one of these leftist type of papers. And this is written as though the headline of this is written from a leftist point of view of let's go get them, right? It's tech. The title at the top is Tech Billionaires Are Plotting Sweeping Secret Plan to Boost Joe Biden. Inside the experiments, data wars, and partisan news sites that Silicon Valley thinks can help Biden catch up to Trump. And the people that are involved with this are Reid Hoffman, Eric Schmidt, Dustin Moskovitz, and Lauren Powell Jobs. Now, these names may not mean anything to you, but look them up. These are big-time billionaires. These are big-time Silicon Valley tech people. And, let's go through the story here, and I'll kind of point some of that out. Silicon Valley's new political movement, 4 billionaires in particular. LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman. Okay, Reid Hoffman. Yesterday I was talking about how they had actually gone down, and a term that people use all the time called false flag. That the left loves to say that is a conspiracy theory and false flags don't really happen. He himself admitted that what they did in Alabama in the Senate campaign of Roy Moore, Dustin Moskovitz, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, admitted in an interview that they had tried to, or did commit a false flag in trying to affect that election. And look, that guy was a freaking knucklehead anyway down there, Roy Moore, but they did affect the election. Well, he's up to it again. Philanthropist. I love that name, because the majority of things that philanthropists do nothing for anybody. It just makes them feel good. I think I told this story where Bill Gates and several other philanthropists were on stage at the UN once when I was there, and they were discussing world hunger, but they never talked about raising money that's all they talked about. They never talked about teaching people how to farm, or cultivating soils, or building greenhouses so they can cultivate food, or how to clean the water up, or get rid of mosquitoes. In fact, they never talk about getting rid of mosquitoes. They always talk about just giving out mosquito nets and raising money. And that's all they talk about. That's all they ever talked about on stage. There was no solutions came out of that, but they're all philanthropists. They all sat around and making themselves feel good at the UN. That's when I was in the FBI working for the United Nations General Assembly. So Lauren Powell Jobs and former Google CEO Eric Schmidt, boy, what a pair those two must be, have the most ambitious plans according to Recode's interviews with over 20 donors and operatives. The chess moves of this power set are instrumental to fulfilling Democrats, and much of Silicon Valley's 4-year quest to oust Donald Trump. Very, very interesting. Who was the other person that was in there? So these people are big wigs in Silicon Valley. And they're billionaires. And they're doing their best to jump in there and change things. Now, what does that have to do with the story I was just talking about? Well, they're just exactly the same as this Sorkin guy. These are people that, although they do have experience, and some of them made their money, some of them haven't made their money. They got their money from somebody else who made it, basically. But they're not. These people are, their experience and expertise is very finite. It's in this area, this one area. But these people are, a lot of times they're academics, or they are very, very rich in this case. And so they get the same idea in their brain that they know a tremendous amount. A lot of people, and this goes right along with media. I was talking about clickbaiters on the right and left earlier. A lot of people, after they've been on TV, and I saw this many, many times. I had many people ask me, hey, I've wrote a book. Can you help me get on Fox? Or one guy who, I'll remain nameless, used to be a SEAL, and was just hounding me because he was running for Congress and was wanting me to get him on Fox News during his congressional bid. So I did. Once or twice, I made some introductions for him. Well, he didn't win. No way he would have won. And he didn't win. And so what did he do? He turns around and calls me one day and says, hey, can you give me all my contacts from the news? And I said, you're not running for Congress anymore, are you? And he said, no. I said, dude, that's like me giving you my ammunition when we're in battle. I'm not going to give you all my contacts to the media so that you could go on and become, big in media. That's when I was really on Fox and CNN, MSNBC, BBC, everything. I was on all of them. Until it didn't matter if he was on there anyway, because eventually they changed the formats now, and none of us would be on there because they don't use experts. They use people like this Sorkin guy. So these people are, their niche is very finite in what they're good at, what they know, and the experience level that they have. Just because you have money and you fly around doesn't mean, one of the worst, it doesn't mean that you know what you're talking about. One of the worst things, the Bible warns about this, sages throughout the years have warned about this. When you get enough money, when you get rich, very, very rich, you will be surrounded, no matter what you do, unless you live like a hermit, you're going to be surrounded by people that are yes men and yes women, and people that tell you, you know everything and you're smart and you're bright because they're trying to use you, or because they can't afford to live on their own, and the rich person finances them. So this happens a lot, and these people become, in their brain, they brainwash themselves into believing that they know more than they do about everything. Seems like I'm looping everybody into one of these groups, but it's very apparent when it comes to the very, very rich, and in Silicon Valley and on the left, it's very, very common in these people. And I've worked around a lot of very wealthy people, and it's sad, actually, when you see the reality of who they are. A lot of their lives get destroyed because they just can't stop. And heaven forbid, the same thing with people that are on TV. Once TV, once your 15 minutes is up, it crushes a lot of people. And the same thing with, people who are rich will go to their deathbed thinking that they knew a lot because they just kept surrounding themselves with people who would tell them they know a lot, not that they did. And in this case, the problem with it now is money in this country, and it's always kind of been this way, but it's dangerous now because these types of billionaires are hell-bent on a socialist society. And that's something that is very alarming. It's very alarming. And it's not like, it would just be different. I'm not saying I would ever want a socialist environment, because I don't. I like living in a republic of free states and free people. And I love what the way the founding fathers set up this country and why they set it up and what they went through to get to that point. They didn't just make a bunch of money and create some kind of fake idea. Their ideas and the way they set this country up that's affected the world was done through blood, sweat, and tears, and done and created through experience and knowledge and understanding and education, not just in school, but also in running from tyranny and suffering under tyranny. These Silicon Valley people and these billionaires have done none of that stuff. And it's not like if they got their way that anything would be better and brighter. These people, I've met these people. They are not nice. Some of them are. Some of them could be nice, and some of them are truly passionate about wanting to help people. Are just twisted in the way that they see that it should be done. They don't understand the reality of rights and how we got to where we are. But a lot of these people, are not nice people. And I can't imagine how in the world they think that they're going to be the ones to bring about this great society. It's not going to happen. Again, I've talked about this numerous times. If you want examples of the reality of the way that these people think, look at Satan. Look at Satan in Genesis when he convinced Adam and Eve to defy God and eat of the apple. That did not work out so well for Adam and Eve. He promised them a lot of stuff. He said that God doesn't really know what he's talking about. You should eat of this apple. Because if you do, you're going to be smart. You're going to be smart and you're going to know all this. They didn't realize that the lie that he was telling them was so that we could be his slave, and so that the knowledge that we gain through blood, sweat, and tears would be the knowledge that he gains. Satan has gained knowledge throughout our years and years of suffrage. Don't think that he is here. Don't think that he is not. And he was cast down here just like we were. And he has been learning. I always think about the relationship there, like the supercomputers and or the computers and stuff in the machines in the Matrix, and how they just use the people as batteries. And I often look at this, and that's exactly the way that Satan has used people. I literally think he probably saw what was going to happen and was willing to, or maybe not willing to give it all up, but he thought that the people, maybe he didn't think he was going to get cast out, but he definitely knew that the people would, and that they would be exposed after they ate of that apple to the knowledge of good and evil, but they would die. And you notice in Genesis, Satan never ate the apple. He never ate that apple. So he's not going to die like that. But he knew that we would, but he knew that if human beings had offspring and they had that knowledge, it would go on. But he also, I think, probably knew that along with eating that apple, the reality was, it's not that the apple of the tree of life gave you the knowledge, gave Adam and Eve instant knowledge. What it did was it opened them up to sin so that they would be exposed to good and evil, and then they were kicked out of the garden and forced to face good and evil. And that's the reality of that tree and that apple. There may or may not have been, I'm just assuming, there may not have been anything special about that tree or that apple. He could have said, don't eat that corn, or don't pick that potato out of the ground and eat it, because you will surely die. It's the potato of life, or of knowledge of good and evil, not the potato of life. But the reality is, I don't know if there was anything special about that tree, except for the fact that he told them not to eat it. They did, and that opened them up to the knowledge of good and evil that would be gained through toil and sweat and blood. And Satan himself, the great liar, the father of all lies, the magician, convinced them to eat that apple. And it did not work out well for them. Now, in the long run, it works out for us, those that believe, because the sacrifice of Jesus, who, by the way, is the tree of life. But it didn't work out so well for Adam and Eve. I have a feeling they thought, well, man, we ate of this apple. Where's the knowledge of good and evil? It's not that great. Satan is exactly like socialists in that they will convince people and these billionaires and these Silicon Valley people and all these leftists and even the useful idiots who think they know that those people are the ones we should follow. The Jeff Sorkins. They will lead you to believe that if you follow them, everything is going to be better, and that Trump is evil, or that conservatives are evil, or that you have to progress because if you don't, it's evil. They will try to convince you of that and say, you don't need to listen to them. You don't need to listen to those founding fathers or that Constitution. That Constitution is a living, breathing document. It can be amended. That's what they preach, just like Satan. And if you eat of their tree, or if you, not to say they eat of their tree, if you deny the reality of what our Constitution is, and you take a bite of the socialist apple, it is not going to end well for this country. If you want an example of liberals in conflict in liberal-controlled cities, look at the lady in the park. Look at the guy who, had to point out that she had her dog off the leash. Instead of just walking on and going on, he had to tell her, you need to put your dog on the leash. She then freaks out, calls 911 and says a black man, an African-American man is what she said, is harassing her or whatever. It was a total ridiculous situation, should never happen. He is so amped that he's filming her. She's so amped that she can't breathe, calling the cops and choking her dog. That's the mindset in these weirdo cities. Look at Minneapolis. This guy gets pulled over. Cops, this guy was like 17 or 19 years on the force, who lives in a city that is ran by liberals, in a police department that's ran by liberals, which means automatically their law enforcement are not being taught the right things, that they're probably not hiring the right people. The frustration levels are out of the freaking roof. The morale is probably in the dumpsters because that's what happens in a liberal ran city in a liberal police department. And this cop murders this guy on the ground by choking him out with his leg when there was absolutely no reason to do that. The cuffs were on. He should have put that guy, that he comes under the protection of the police once the cuffs are on. Believe it or not, that's the way it goes. If somebody's fighting you, you meet them with equal force, maybe a little bit more so they stop. Once you cuff them, unless they're still kicking or fighting or whatever, in that case you could hog time or just stick them in the car. They're under your protection and the protection of the Constitution. You can't run up and punch a guy when they're in cuffs. If he's fighting you 3 seconds before you get him in cuffs, if he's fighting you or trying to bite you, you can punch him for your protection and to subdue him, to stop the behavior. But once the cuffs are on, that force is limited to his protection and your protection. That's it. Unless he somehow wibbles out of the handcuffs and tries to stab you, shoot you, or choke you, you're very limited in what you can do. But these are things that exist a lot of times. Listen, there's police departments in conservative places where this stuff happens as well. There's no doubt about that, because across the board, the hiring process of law enforcement has deteriorated and the management in law enforcement has deteriorated. But these liberal cities where these things happen, what occurs afterwards? Now there's looting. Now they were looting and rioting and burning the American flag. What does that have to do with anything that this cop did? They're going to burn the American flag. Why? Because activists come in there, convince them that the man is coming down on them. That's a whole nother show that we could talk about. I served with people of all races, nationalities, in the SEAL teams. They never let it stop them. I served with poor people and rich people, regardless. You think, I grew up extremely poor, but I've met rich people. I put more rich people in jail probably than, well, I wouldn't say more than I have poor, but I put a ton of rich people in jail. They had plenty of money, could have done whatever they wanted. I've seen rich people kill themselves because they had no fulfillment in life. They got everything that they wanted, and it killed them. They killed themselves. But what you are and who you make of yourself is up to you. If that cop killed that guy, there's no reason for you to burn the American flag in a riot. There's no reason for you to break into Target and steal things. That has nothing to do with anything. But that's a liberal-controlled city. And that's what happens in these types of environments. And that's the truth. And that, my friends, is all she wrote for today. So, I want to tell you real quick, the CQRF, the Constitution Quick Reaction Force, this is something I used to do on my video cast show several years ago that I want to get going again. What that is that everybody that is conservative or cares about this country will start getting on social media. If you hear of a protest going on that's outside, even if it's outside, throw on your mask. Go out there and stand in the distance, whatever, if you're worried about that. If not, get up there. Start standing together for the right reasons. But start hashtagging CQRF, the Constitution Quick Reaction Force. That is us, folks. That's us. The CQRF is back, baby. And you have to be willing to stand together no matter what. Let's make this CQRF thing the hashtag big. Let's get it going, because you know what, folks? This is The Experts. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. The truth has arrived. Peace. And we're out of here.
Hold on. I'm not going to do this with you, Joe. Every morning you try to question the questions I'm asking.
Peace, and we're out.